Hey there, I'm Nick, and in this video, I will show you how to prepare for the behavioral questions in the Amazon interview. I am a former Amazon bar raiser who has interviewed hundreds of Amazon candidates and decided if the company should hire them or not. I have also certified many other Amazon bar raisers into existence. I was a bar raiser mentor, so I know very deeply what it takes to succeed in the Amazon interview and get hired by Amazon. And I'm sharing this knowledge step by step during the course of 7 different videos over 7 days so that you can get hired by Amazon, you can change your life in the process, remake your career, and make hundreds of thousands of dollars or more in salary and stock units given to you by Amazon. The behavioral interview questions are so important that this is the only topic that I'll dedicate 2 separate videos to. In this video, I'll talk about how to get ready to answer the behavioral questions. And in the next video, I'll role play and show you how to answer these questions in the STAR framework. So to use an analogy, if we were shooting a movie here, today's video is all about getting ready, learning your script, finding the location, choosing the right actors, picking up your makeup and costumes, and the next video will be about shooting the movie itself. First, let's describe what the behavioral interview questions are that Amazon's going to ask you. Behavioral interview questions are questions that start in the fashion of, tell me a time you did X, tell me a case you did Y, and with these questions, Amazon is going to find out how you handled conflicts and adversity in your career so far. So effectively, these companies believe that unlike stocks, for people, prior performance is indicative of future performance. Amazon wants to find out exactly the steps and illustrations and details you took and the results that you effected in your career so far to determine if you'd be a good fit with their values that they call leadership principles. Your Amazon behavioral interview answers are gonna absolutely make or break your interview. So much so that if Amazon decides that you lower the bar and you fail that part of the interview, they're going to block you from interviewing with the company for 6 to 12 months. Okay, enough with the context. Now let's cover today's topic of how to prepare for Amazon's behavioral interview questions. And I'm gonna cover this topic in 3 separate parts. Part number 1 is to prepare a list of at least 20 accomplishments and 5 failures from your career so far, from your professional career so far. I'll show you what I've done with my accomplishments and failures. Here they are. I have listed 20 accomplishments and then 5 failures. I've listed actually 25 accomplishments and 9 failures from my early Amazon career. At this point, at this juncture, you can just list them with a bulleted list. Co-found Amazon Game Studios in 2013, secure 6 showcase titles for Fire TV launch. I was a product manager and business development person in the Amazon Game Studios division. Create the Amazon second party games contract, long form, so on and so forth. So I've listed these accomplishments and then I've listed the failures. So that's all you need at this juncture, just a list of 20 accomplishments plus 5 failures or more than that if you can manage. Why is it important to have so many accomplishments and failures? I will reverse engineer the math for you. You will be interviewed by a team of 5 Amazon interviewers. And each of those interviewers will be commissioned by the hiring manager to examine 1 or 2 leadership principles and how you compare against the Amazon bar for these leadership principles. And possibly that interviewer could also be asked to examine anywhere from 0 to 1 functional competencies and how you stack against those. Now, when Amazon gives each interviewer 1 to 2 leadership principles and 0 to 1 functional competencies, they're asking that person to review those areas fractally, meaning that each interviewer is going to examine only those leadership principles and none of the other Amazon leadership principles. Amazon has 16 leadership principles, so each interviewer is going to look at only the 1 or 2 that the hiring manager gave them. That's what fractal focus means. This fractal focus assures that the interviewer spends the 45 or 60 minutes of the interview drilling into just these few areas. And then when everybody gets together during the debrief to evaluate what their assessment was for each of those fractal focuses of the Amazon leadership principles, they're going to have a very deep and complete, on the other hand, picture because nobody would overlap in the areas that they evaluate, yet each area is going to be evaluated quite deeply. So now that each interviewer has 2 to 3 in general areas to drill into, they're going to likely ask you 1 to 2 questions to find out if you raise the Amazon bar against these leadership principles and functional competencies. So when you gross this up, you are looking at roughly 5 or 6 unique interview questions that each interviewer is going to ask you. Then when you gross it up further for the full loop of 5 interviewers, you're looking at roughly 25 or 30 unique questions that you will hear during the Amazon interview loop. And it's very important not to repeat your answers to those behavioral questions. If you could repeat 1 or 2, that's fine. But if you could avoid repeating, that's even better. That is why you should prepare ahead of time at least 20 accomplishments and 5 failures. Not because Nick tells you to, but because that's going to ensure that you have uninterrupted, unique coverage with answers across the multitude of questions that you're going to hear during the Amazon interview loop. Now, the second point I want to make is, why is it important to prepare failures ahead of time? Failures actually demonstrate certain leadership principles like backbone, learn and be curious, earn trust, so on and so forth, others as well. They demonstrate these leadership principles better than accomplishments do. And you can also bet that the bar raiser and often even the hiring manager are going to ask you failure questions to evaluate your ability to deal with conflict, with setbacks, so on and so forth. That's why, in addition to accomplishments, you should have failures prepared as well. This takes us to part number 2 of how to prepare for the Amazon behavioral interview questions. In this part, you should match your interview answers with the leadership principles that they demonstrate. You can see, if I go back here to the Word file that I've shared with you, you can see how I have listed illustrated LPs, illustrated leadership principles, for each of the accomplishments and failures that I have prepared. I'm going to actually do one better and show you a matrix that I highly suggest you replicate in your preparation. In the matrix, in Excel or whatever worksheet you want to use, you should list the leadership principles as the column headers: customer obsession, ownership, so on and so forth. And you should list your accomplishments, highlighted in green here, very creatively, and your failures, highlighted in orange, as the headers of the rows of that matrix. And then in between, you should check the leadership principles that the given accomplishment demonstrates. The important piece here to keep in mind is that there's a many-to-many relationship between the accomplishments and the leadership principles. What this means is that one accomplishment can demonstrate multiple leadership principles. For example, me co-founding Amazon Game Studios in 2013, it demonstrates pretty much, in my view, every single leadership principle / value under the sun. On the flip side, one leadership principle, such as ownership, could be demonstrated by multiple different accomplishments. Hence, there's a many-to-many relationship between the accomplishments and failures and the leadership principles, on the other hand. So it's important that you check those intersecting cells where the leadership principle is demonstrated by the given accomplishment or failure. So effectively, you can use this format when getting ready to interview, not just with Amazon, but with any other company that practice behavioral interviewing. In order to do so, you should just replace the leadership principles here at the top with the relevant values of the company that you're interviewing with, and the approach stays exactly the same. So going back to Amazon's leadership principles here, I have highlighted in gray 4 leadership principles which you should not worry about to get ready for during your Amazon behavioral interview. Those 4 leadership principles are hire and develop the best, frugality, and the 2 new leadership principles that Amazon has: strive to be Earth's best employer, and success and scale bring broad responsibility. Why is that? Why would nobody ask you questions on these 4 leadership principles? Because nobody bothers to check things like frugality or the 2 new leadership principles. Again, if you do the math, if you have 5 interviewers and each gets about a couple leadership principles, you can only cover as many as 10. So 5 or 6 of those are going to be left by the wayside. Hire and develop the best is not going to be relevant to you if you are interviewing for an individual contributor position. If you're interviewing for a manager role, you absolutely need to get ready and prepare hire and develop answers. But for an IC role, you can just ignore those. If you have hire and develop accomplishments, from your career so far that demonstrate the other leadership principles, absolutely use them. But in order to lighten your load and to make it more pragmatic for you, I think you should eliminate, or you should consider eliminating, these 4 leadership principles and just focus your preparation even further. Okay, and that takes us to the final third part of your preparation to ace the Amazon behavioral interview questions. The third part of your preparation is to load balance this matrix. Once you've listed the accomplishments and the failures, the intersecting leadership principles, you go to the bottom and you take a look at the count of how many accomplishments and failures are demonstrating each of the Amazon leadership principles. And you want to make sure that you have enough depth. I would suggest that you have at least 3 deep coverage, meaning each leadership principle needs to be covered by at least 3 accomplishments and failures. For some leadership principles, that's going to be really easy to do. For others, it's going to be hard and you need to work on it. Let me give you an illustration. So for things like deliver results and for things like ownership, or bias for action. Where's bias for action? Right here. You can see the counts are so high. Why? Because it's pretty much impossible to deliver an accomplishment without delivering results, without showing ownership, so on and so forth, without showing bias for action, diving deep. So these are the more elementary leadership principles that are going to be really easy to cover. You're going to get to that 3 deep state right away, very quickly. Now, other leadership principles, such as write a lot, such as thinking big, have backbone, disagree and commit. Those leadership principles are more unique, and you would need to sit back and think of conflict situations which you resolved and achieved an output in the process that demonstrate those leadership principles. Read the definition of the Amazon leadership principles, think through your career so far, and determine what accomplishments and failures you've had that illustrate these leadership principles. So the first part of your load balancing process would be to make sure that you have at least 3 deep accomplishments and failures per leadership principle. Then there are 3 other steps you should worry about when you load balance your portfolio of answers. The first step is you want to make sure that you have listed the accomplishments and failures with the biggest impact, the biggest quantifiable impact in terms of revenue earned or costs saved, patents produced, customers gained, so on and so forth. Once you come up with these 25 or 30 accomplishments and failures, then think back, step back and think, hey, are those really the best, highest impact accomplishments that I've had in my career? Are those the 30, 35 chunks of work that I've done that I'm the proudest of? And if the answer is yes, then yes, you've absolutely optimized for impact. The next component you need to optimize for is recency. Recency means that you need to list your more recent accomplishments, and they would ideally have more weight than your older accomplishments in your career. Now, impact comes before that. If the accomplishment has a bigger impact, it doesn't really matter how old it is, you should use it in your portfolio answers. But if 2 accomplishments have the same impact and one is more recent, you should absolutely use the more recent one over the older one. And the final razor, the final step in load balancing your answers is diversity. Diversity means you want to describe different aspects of your career. If you're an engineer who's coding programs, or if you're a business development person who's negotiating contracts, if you list each program you've developed or each contract you've signed, even though they have good impact, even though they're somewhat recent, your diversity would suffer. Therefore, you should think of different aspects of your career and illustrate those and talk about those during the Amazon interview. For example, you can talk about your hires when you've made a mistake with a hire, when you've been right about a hire. You should talk about conflicts that you've had with your manager, with your colleagues, with the customers around you, so on and so forth. So make sure that you have diversity across your accomplishments and failures, and that's going to take care of it. So to recap, there are 4 in total steps with which to load balance your portfolio of answers. 1, make sure that you have at least 3 deep per leadership principle. 2, make sure that you have listed the highest impact accomplishments. 3, make sure that you have recent accomplishments. And 4, make sure that you have diversity in the accomplishments and failures that you will describe in the Amazon interview. Now that you've learned how to prepare for the Amazon behavioral interview questions, it's time to put that preparation into practice and watch this video here where I will role play and show you how to answer a behavioral interview question through the STAR framework. The STAR framework stands for situation, task, action, result. That's the behavioral interview format that Amazon is going to expect you to describe your accomplishments and failures in. I'm going to role play this in this next video here. I'll see you there soon.